You may already know the English Grandmaster and chess-based presenter Simon Williams, and he's famed in England for being a very sharp attacking player and being one of the main protagonists of the classical Dutch defence. He normally plays it against one d4, but he's also tried it against one c4. I'm going to quickly show you a game where he beats the strong IM from England, Karl Marr. I know it was back in Simon's younger days, back in the late 90s, but it still demonstrates the power that black has in this variation. So after c4, f5, g3, black will play with the bishop on e7 in this variation by just putting it like this. And the plan is to play d6 and either not fianchetto the bishop that we've seen before and not placing it on d6. The bishop on d6 actually looks good, but it just hits the pawn on g3. So the fianchetto structure is a very good way of defending against the attack down towards h2. So Simon's arguing that the bishop is just as good on e7 here. And both sides castle, knight c3, black plays d6. This is the way he plays in the classical Dutch. Now, in the classical Dutch, black is looking actually to checkmate white with queen e8 and swinging the queen out like a Grand Prix attack. And the idea is to play e5, f4, bishop h3 and knight g4. Sounds quite primitive, but it actually works if white does not play good moves to try and prevent this idea. After white played d3, should just say that d4 would now lead to the absolute main line of the classical Dutch, which is beyond the scope of this DVD, of course, and we're not interested in transposing back to d4 lines in a general sense here. So we're going to stick with the English flavour with d3. Black played e5 and white countered with e4. So again, black can play this pawn sacrifice with f4, and I think we should take it, although we could also play d4 here as well to try and counter the base of the pawn on f4. But still, after g takes f4, black plays something like knight h5. Maybe black has a little bit of compensation here because of the weakened white king, but not completely convinced. Again, it's something to be worried if you're a little bit concerned about if you don't want to play g takes f4. But if even Simon didn't do it, then it can't be that good. He instead played knight c6, just getting developed, and white played h3, just keeping a piece out of here. Here came the queen to e8, and I think white reacted in the correct way though. He took on f5, and then by opening up the bishop, then played pawn to d4. If black exchanges everything on d4 like this, I think this only helps white because the bishop now attacks b7, and white's got plenty of space to bring his pieces in, especially bringing the rook to the e file, where it will do a lot of damage towards the black queen on e8 and bishop on e7. So after d4, Williams just played queen h5. Now white can win a piece here with g4, but he would be ill-advised to do so, because after knight takes g4 and bishop takes g4, black will win the knight on f3. He's not even going to take it with the bishop, he's probably going to just take it with the rook as well. And white could hardly give up his light squared bishop, because then his king will be completely open. So g4 doesn't work here. Some variations it does though, so you need to be on the lookout. And now in this position, white played knight d5. I think though that white should actually play d takes e5 here, and after d takes e5 just play a move like knight h4. I think this is the best way to try and dilute black's attack, since we offer a queen exchange and we hit the bishop on e6. This has happened before in a game played in France, and after the exchange and bishop e6, white just played b3, and white now could dream of some pressure on the e5 pawn at some moment. Maybe bishop b2, knight d5 as usual. So I think this has been the way that white should have played here. But instead, he tried to fight fire with fire and played knight to d5. Black, of course, decided to take on h3 since he was allowed to. And after d takes e5, he played knight g4. We've already seen here black playing all the moves that we've just spoken about. The queen coming in, the bishop coming in, and the knight coming in to g4. Of course, white could play knight f4 here with a fork on the two pieces. But it probably took Simon about 3 seconds to realise that he was just going to give up the rook for it, which he did. And after bishop takes f4, which wasn't played, just want to calculate to see if black has a win here. But really what we need to do is eliminate this knight in some way. Because if we can take the bishop, we want to be able to swing the queen in down towards h2. Maybe something like d takes e5 looks quite good. If the bishop moves, then we can play knight to d4. And after knight takes d4, we clear the way for the queen to come in to this square. Quite a funny variation, really. If king takes g2, queen h2 check, king f3, rook f3, rook f8 check, king takes g4, and h5 mate is a picturesque way for black to try and checkmate white here. So not all forced, by the way, but I think that black players who want to attack might be interested in this kind of setup here. So after rook takes f4, white played g takes f4, but then black just calmly carried on with d takes e5. And when you're attacking, there's no need to rush really. I think that after rook f8, black will have all his pieces in play. He would like to play bishop c5 as well, and using Capablanca's rule of attacking with 3 pieces, we see black has at least 4 here, if not 5 or 6. So that's the dangers for white when you play the English against the Dutch, that black can swing the queen out here and go for a kingside attack. So do be careful if your opponent does that. Try to take steps to see how you can avoid that. I think white should have played d takes e5 and then exchange the queens off with knight h4. That's my personal opinion in this position.